Yo guys! It's your friend here, bringing you another awesome Naruto What If tale. What if Naruto was a perverted seal master part 1? If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin. Naruto Uzumaki had a problem. He knew this from a young age. Everyone seemed to talk in a code that he couldn't fully understand, like there were little things he didn't understand. People made no sense to him, still he was interested in them. He spent a lot of time watching people to see if he could find a pattern. Sometimes he thought he did, but it was never as consistent as he would have liked. People were confused by it. What made things worse was that these people didn't like him for some reason he didn't always know. When he was 7, he asked the owner of a nearby shop why he and everyone else looked at the young blonde so dirty. When the Uzumaki asked, "What's your deal?" he didn't ask it in the best way. The man was surprised that the child with a bad reputation would talk to him directly and so bluntly. The shopkeeper said, "Nothing's my business. Leave," which made Naruto turn his head sideways in confusion. "Yes, there is. You dislike me, but I've never done anything to you. I want to know why." This made the man nervous. He'd love to tell the kid that the reason he didn't like him was because he was scared of him. He didn't think the child was the fox. But how could a small child really hold it? What if he got hurt, mad, or died? But what do you do if you were scared of a child? Even as a civilian, it was better to be disliked, ignored, and shunned than to be afraid. But he couldn't say that because he was too ashamed. He knew he'd die if he did it, so he pushed the child away with his broom and closed his shop for the day. He would drink all night to try not to think about how unfair it was that people were afraid of him, but he didn't know why. Naruto asked more people that day, but they all told him the same thing. His Oji-san told him to stop asking people for information because they wouldn't tell him. He also promised not to say. Naruto knew he had lost, but he decided to get something sweet from the Hokage if he wasn't going to get his answer. Because Naruto didn't like people, he spent a lot of his time reading or playing, training in the forest. When he wasn't watching people, books made sense, nature made sense. Naruto would insist that people did not, and it was because he didn't understand that he did so badly in school. At first, the young Uzumaki wasn't stupid, he just didn't understand what the academy was trying to teach him. They tell you read a book and then they tell you the same things that the book told you. How does that teach? He was bored because he had to remember things. Iruka-sensei was always bugging Naruto to work harder. Naruto said he would if the lessons were actually useful. Naruto thought that the explanations that were given were crap. The clone jutsu is the best example of this. The clone jutsu was too hard for Naruto to do. He understood Iruka-sensei knew it. His students knew that. When Naruto asked for help, all he was told was nonsense about not being able to control his chakra. Just get a better handle on your chakra. Naruto, what exactly does that mean? The better you can control your chakra, the better you can perform your jutsu. But what does control mean? Is there a unit? How many units of chakra does the clone jutsu need? You have to just feel it. Naruto, you've been a total letdown, said Jinchuriki, who didn't know what he was talking about. Azuruka watched the 8-year-old leave his classroom. The same things would happen to Naruto. He didn't have anyone to train with, so he picked up bad habits, and his taijutsu wasn't as good as it could have been. Some of the skills he could learn on his own were among the best in the class. He wasn't the best, but he wasn't in the middle either. Naruto, when he was 8 years old, was ready to accept that he would always be a stranger in a strange land and never fully understand people or their things, until one day when Iruka-sensei showed him some simple Fūinjutsu moves. The blonde was hooked right away. He couldn't explain it, but the symbols, how they went together, and the end result all made sense. He didn't just want to learn that art, he needed to. He even asked Oji-san to help him do it. Now Naruto, you have to be very careful with even the most basic Fūinjutsu, and your calligraphy has to be perfect. If I see you being careless, I'll take away your tools until you grow up. Define irresponsible. Og-san, trying things you haven't prepared for well and rushing through levels when you've already gotten good at them. What if I have to do a project or test to show that I Have the skills needed before I can move on to the next level. Naruto asked. That should be enough then, we're on the same page, the blonde said, putting out her hand. He shook it with a smile on his face. Naruto's speech was a little bit more formal because he improved his skills by reading out loud as subjects got harder. It changed how he chose his words. One more thing, Harrison said, laughing at the boy's pout. You can't skip the academy no matter how interesting you find Fūinjutsu. He had run into this problem early on and knew he had to make Naruto stay or the boy would just keep doing what he wanted. Naruto's life changed the day he got the 10,000-page books on Fūinjutsu, the calligraphy guides and the calligraphy set. He kept making steady progress on his chosen subject. For the rest of the school year he didn't do much of his bookwork other than the bare minimum, but he still did well on the practical exercises. Iruka-sensei wasn't happy, but he couldn't do much because the Nara heir also didn't do much. By the end of the school year he had read the first 2 volumes. He was able to do this by reading 1 volume every 2 months. Harrison was still amazed. The first 2 volumes were all out the most basic things like how to recognize seals and the basic languages of seals. The first part ended with the storage seal. The second was an introduction to synchronized and localized reactions such as explosive tags and building arrays with many different parts. Naruto felt good when his Oji-san said nice things about him. When he asked what that meant, his Oji-san told him that it was probably a mix of feelings. When someone was praised, it made them feel proud and valued, and when someone close to them did it, the feeling was even stronger. Naruto learned for the first time that you can feel more than one emotion at the same time. He realized that made it harder for him to explain why people acted the way they did because he was making wrong assumptions about how they felt. He would have to start over again. Naruto was able to make big leaps in his sealing skills over the summer break. Helped him improve many of his other skills as well. As summer break was coming up, the blonde knew he had a lot of things he wanted to do, but without a plan he wouldn't get much done. His Oji-san stressed how important it was to have good work habits to get the most done. Naruto's Oji-san told him to read a few books on project management, so he did. First he decided on his mission, which was to find ways to improve as many of his weaknesses as possible. As a shinobi, chakra control would be the most important thing to do. This he had to figure out why it was so hard for him to control his chakras. Find the answer through seals. In the 3rd volume of his Fūinjutsu books he talked about how to control chakra networks. This book showed how chakra suppressors, paralysis seals, shock tags and even resistance seals worked, how they connected to the chakra system and what effects they had on the bow. The book had a detailed diagram of the chakra system and showed where each tenketsu should be placed. In Volume 4 there were the beginnings of barriers and other security seals as well as ways to find chakra and movement. Naruto read them all in the first month of his break, and because they made him feel good he didn't read any other volumes. Naruto was determined to get a better handle on his chakra before he found a good way to measure chakra. He tried out 12 different designs and made dozens of attempts at each. He was lucky that his Oji-san took part so he could compare the two when his chakra reserves were the same as his Oji-san's. The blonde was surprised and knew that wasn't normal when he heard that. He went straight to the library to learn more about chakra networks. It didn't take him long to learn that a person's chakra network grew as they got older and trained, in their chakra kappa city grew along with it. He thought that his network wasn't ready to handle his chakra because it wasn't old enough and that control exercises wouldn't change that. Naruto figured out that his reserves were flooding his network. He needed to find a way to either get rid of the extra chakra or make his network bigger so it could handle the flow of chakra. As the blonde sketched out ideas for a second chakra network, he ran into a big problem. He couldn't use this kind of seal on himself on his summons. There was also a big complicated seal. When he ran to his Oji-san he found the answer to one problem. While learning about the other horizon didn't look upset as his favorite blonde asked him calmly about the seal on his stomach. He sometimes forgot that Naruto was a vessel and a sacrifice because he only saw his surrogate grandson. The fact that the boy was usually easy to take care of helped. If he asks A question, answer it or make a deal with him, and Naruto would go on with his day. But the boy was not always the same. Early on he spent a lot of time alone, which made it hard for him to express or understand other people's emotions. He often had to say out loud how he felt and be told directly how others felt too. Aside from feeling bad that Naruto was so affected, he didn't know how the boy would react to the news. He might not have any trouble with it, or it might be too much for him. Harrison didn't want to take a chance, so he did something that should have been beneath the god of Shinobi. He offered the Uzumaki Aijutsu if he waited until he graduated to find out about the seal and didn't try to break it. I need a semi-autonomous clone. Have you got anything like that? That could be said about any corporal clone. Naruto-kun. Which clone jutsu is the best? The best depends on the situation. In aim or Kiri, the water clone is useful and easy to make, while the stone and mud clones last a long time. Are they all copies of elementals? Og-san: no, there's another, but it's hard on the chakra. I have. Yes, it's true. I'll teach you the shadow clone jutsu, even though I know I'll regret it. But Naruto-kun, you should never send your clone to school for you. Why would I do that? I wouldn't learn anything if I did. Once dispelled, the clones send their memories and any extra chakra back to their creator. Oh, this sounds like the best jutsu that has ever been thought of, Harrison said as he ran his hand through Naruto's hair, which made the boy smile. My sensei would probably be honored that you think so. He could probably handle Naruto's personality because it was similar to Tobirama sensei's. He told Naruto a lot about Tobirama, in part to show the boy that he could still be a good ninja even though he had some weird habits. They went to a private training ground where Naruto could learn what would become his signature jutsu while spending a cool fall day with his favorite person. Naruto wouldn't finish his supplementary chakra network seal until 2 weeks before the start of the winter break. His clones carefully drew it on his body. On many of his tenketsu they had to draw very small seals. It took 5 hours and he was glad he had paid attention. In the academy's meditation unit he liked to read, but he was also very active and had to run around or work out before he could really get into his books. The clones opened the seal. It hurt for a few seconds, but after a few minutes the pain went away. Naruto did the chakra circulation exercise while sitting in the lotus position. He couldn't believe how much easier it was for his chakra to move and how he didn't have to fight to control it. He could feel how the artificial network helped the chakra move in the right direction. Before he tried the clone jutsu he did that for an hour. His clones were still not right, but they were getting better. Naruto came to the conclusion that he would still have to work on controlling his chakra, but it wouldn't be as hard, and the limit to how much control he could get wouldn't be so low. During the break Naruto would give chakra control to a few of his clones. His OG-san wouldn't let him have more than 5 though. As long as they could they would put leaves all over their bodies. Naruto chose to deal with Anit. Her issue. He had seen that the clan kids were getting better at taijutsu. Naruto could beat most of the kids who weren't in his clan, but he'd have trouble with the kids in his clan except for Nara, who wouldn't even try. He did not like what was happening. He didn't want other people to do badly, but he did want to win and be at least better than the rest. His OG-san said that was a feeling of rivalry and competition. He said that those things were fine in small amounts, but that Naruto had gone too far. If he ever thought he would do anything to beat his friends, that it's fine to try to be the best. He shouldn't look down on others or forget that they were all on the same side. In the end it was good to know what the feeling was called and that it should be kept in check, but knowing what made him do what he did didn't solve his problem. He talked at length with his OG-san about it. The academy's style was too stiff and basic for him. Og-san laughed and said, well, it's simple and that's the point. He said that the academy library had a lot of different styles, but Naruto should have an idea of what kind of style he wanted. Naruto nodded but made a sad face. If he tried to learn a new style without a plan he would end up in the same trouble he was in now. All night long Naruto and his clones would think about the problem. There wouldn't be a way out until morning. Self-teaching a style of taijutsu is hard because you don't know if the kata are right and you might get used to making mistakes or having gaps in your form, but he didn't have a caring teacher or family who could help him. He didn't like that thought, but he didn't pay attention to it. He needed a way to learn the right way to do things without having to have someone watch over him. The answer was going to be seals. Naruto thought It would be a good start if he could make a seal that could record movement. He could then build an array that would use those pre-recorded movements as a baseline. As Naruto went through the keta, he would get a small shock when he did a move wrong. He did it right if there were no shocks. Many of the techniques used in security seals could be used in this way, but it would be a very advanced way to do so. Naruto was sure he could figure it out, even though it would be hard. All he had to do was find someone good enough and willing to be recorded, and even though that would solve one problem, it wouldn't be enough. Being good at kata doesn't make you a good fighter. He would still need a training partner. As winter came to Fire Country, Naruto began working on the next book. He did calligraphy every day and had his clones reread the other texts while he learned new things. His OG-san asked him to remember about art, but he wouldn't say why. The fifth volume was an introduction to intermediate sealing theory. It had new languages, ideas about chakra, and a start on log and algorithms. The book also talked about how to turn different parts of ninjutsu into Fūinjutsu, with a focus on putting things into barriers and coming up with ways to stop jutsu. It was hard for the Uzumaki, and he had to look at a lot of outside texts and talk to his OG-san for help, but he was able to finish it in 3 months right before spring. The sixth volume was all about how to use the information, how to write faster and how to write while you're on the move, how to carve seals into hard surfaces like rocks or foundations to make them more stable. Chakra engraving was the name of the method that made it possible to use a conduit to make a microblade of concentrated chakra. Chakra etching was rare because it took a long time compared to ink-based or materialization methods, but it was more secure and lasted longer because it took another etching to interact with the seal. It also took a lot of control over the chakra, more than the leaf sticking exercise would give. The volume was helpful because it had instructions on walking on the surface and different ways to walk on water. To learn all of those exercises, it would take a month and a lot of clones who complain and freeze, but in the end it was worth it because Naruto liked to etch with Sanbon and did it on the weekends for fun. By the middle of May, Uzumaki, who was only 9 years old, had his motion capture array down, but in the end it wasn't a big part of his growth as a person. He showed Og-san and told him about his plan. He had even chosen the style during the time of the warring clans. Pensaclet was mostly used by the tribes in the south. It wasn't used much anymore, but his Oji-san knew someone who knew how to do it, so he agreed to ask the Junin for help. A week after summer break started, Naruto met the Junin. The man was different. "Hello, you must be the youngest Naruto-kun," yelled the green-clad enigma with a bowl cut. Naruto was found on the private trainee ground of the Hokage. It had a few open spaces, a big pond, and even some rock formations, but most of the time it was hard to see because the trees were so tall. Naruto replied, "Hi, I'm not the youngest in my class, so I'm not the most young." His Oji-san had told him that being honest outside of ninja Saiyans was very important. Guy said, "Ha ha ha, Naruto-kun, being young has nothing to do with age. Even our wise Hokage is full of the fires of youth." And then he put on a nice guy pose. Naruto wasn't surprised by how excited he was, but he did find it interesting. "So what's a metaphor?" "Yes, that's it." "Okay then. Should we get started? I don't want to waste too much of your time." "Yosh, let's get started." Naruto said. He put the sealing tags on Guy's joints and then activated the larger seal that the taijutsu master was standing on. Then he watched in amazement as Guy did every strike in Juris in the discipline. Naruto knew he had made the right choice when he saw the style in action. It could be fast, flexible, and unpredictable. It used the whole body to attack and defend, and it had grappling and taking down. The blonde was also impressed by Guy's skills. The man did the exercises with ease. Naruto was so focused Guide that he didn't even notice when his OG-san and a small monkey summon showed up. When he got Naruto's attention, the Uzumaki was happy. As his OG-san put it, he was even happier when he told Naruto that he wanted Naruto to record Sambuca Jutsu forms for a quarter-staff because it seemed to fit Naruto better, and for rattan sticks used in Eskrima. Naruto didn't waste any time getting more seals ready for the summoned person, a man named Yubu with white and gray hair. Guy did the training guides, and when he was done, Naruto thanked him and went to set up. Ubu, Harrison said as he watched his summons. and his surrogate grandson interact. He may not be able to say it all, but you've made him very happy. Thank you, guy. It was the least I could do. Hokage-sama and Naruto-kun seems to be a prodigy when it comes to Fūinjutsu. Even though I'm not an expert, I have to agree. I used to worry that he would fall out of a tree in a far-off part of the village. Now I worry that he will blow himself up. Young people are often rambunctious, I know, guy, and I wouldn't want to take that away from him. It makes him happy and he's making quick progress now. If I could just get him to work hard in school, everyone would know is something wrong with him. He does as well as he wants to do. He thinks that much of what the academy teaches is useless. He once said that if he had to memorize the names of the Hokage, there wouldn't be so many books in the library about them. That made guy laugh. Having too much information must mean that it isn't worth remembering for longer than you need it. This argument has some sense. Oh, I know, but I don't want him walking around without common sense or basic facts, so I just asked him to do it for me and he did well. I must be off, Hokage-sama, but I made this exercise plan for Naruto-kun. Oh, he can get the most out of his new taijutsu style. Thank you again, guy. No problem. Guy's plan to work out gave Naruto another problem. Naruto wanted to get the most out of the routine without pushing himself too hard, so he planned to use a modified resistance seal that went up by percentages instead of full levels. But how could he keep a close eye on his progress and chart his growth, and to do it without having to use clones and a lot of equipment? He told all 10 of his clones to come up with a solution because his OG-san let him raise the number. When he woke up the next morning, he was surprised by what they had decided to do. For it to work, he'd need books on medical ninjutsu and jinjutsu. He decided to let the clones do most of the work in that area. He liked working on Fūinjutsu and learning new things, but he thought it was best to leave it to the clones while he worked on his physical skill. Not just fighting but also trapping and tracking, since they were taught in the last term. After he put the resistance seal on, Naruto would get up every morning and go for a run. He would run both normally and like a ninja. He would then stretch to improve his flexibility and do exercises to build high strength, like different kinds of push-ups. Next, he would roll out his seal and practice taijutsu and bukujutsu. On different days he would work on staff in Eskrima for 2 hours each, except for Sundays. He would rest on that day. He would hunt and gather for his lunch and then take a break for an hour. Then he would practice his shuriken jutsu for an hour using kunai shuriken and even senbon because he had them for etching. He would stretch again and then go for a cool-down run before going home to take a shower and chill out for the rest of the afternoon. That was how his summer went, and his clones worked on his latest problem. Instead of practicing chakra control or keeping him safe, they were lucky to find what they needed at the library, and the answers all came from the same clan. Tsunade Senju did the part about medicine and Taka Senju did the part about jinjutsu, and Naruto was lucky because both healer and fighter, a combat medic's journey and forest for the tree's illusions, and you had the types of jutsu he needed as well as other exercises and ideas to help him get a better handle on his chakra. The next year was a lot like the one before it. The 10-year-old Uzumaki trained and studied, but he also made time to see his OG-san and eat ramen from the nice Ichiraku people. He started winning sometimes against the clan heirs and even tried a little harder in the theoretical segments. Naruto did it because it got Iruka-sensei off his back. He thought that was a good enough reason to do it. Uchiha Sasuke was the only person he hadn't been able to beat yet. The boy just kept fighting like losing meant dying, and Naruto got the feeling that the last Uchiha didn't see his classmates as future allies. His OG-san told him that the boy was sad and alone. Naruto didn't disagree, but sometimes his eyes reminded him too much of the villagers, and Naruto didn't want to deal with him any more than he had to. Slowly the Uzumaki moved through Volume 7. It was about how to link and merge sealing arrays, how to make different arrays compatible enough to be merged, or how to build the bridge if they weren't. It also looked at other ways to turn something on, such as timers, changes in weight or temperature and the like. There were ways to open seals that didn't involve chakras. Experts could even use how they felt to open a seal. Naruto had to work slowly because this book had even more complicated symbols. ND languages for sealing. He also didn't want his clones who were making steady progress to be distracted a steady pace during the school year. Shinobi learned more about soft skills like infiltration and gathering information. Iruka-sensei talked about how to fool people by putting on a different persona and what it takes to make a good cover story. Iruka-sensei said that the henge was a good short-term solution, but most shinobi could see through it. Naruto thought that didn't make sense, and it gave him an idea for his first original jutsu. Naruto Uzumaki was so excited that he almost shook. It was the middle of July and he was in the shade of a big tree. It was finally done and he was ready to turn on what he had made. If you saw Naruto, he would be looking at a black bracelet with orange symbols on the beads. They didn't really stand out, but that was just a trick. Naruto sent his chakra into the first bead and he could feel his chakra coming back to him. It was lit up for 1 minute before the chakra stopped coming in. Then Naruto put chakra into a second bead and an information screen that only he could see appeared. The most basic diagnostic jutsu gave it his height, weight, blood type, chakra traits and other information. Naruto wanted to keep track of his progress and knew he needed detailed information about his body to do so. This is why Tsunade's book was so important. Taka's book let him use this information to make a projection similar to Jinjutsu that only the person wearing the bracelet could see. Then Naruto sent chakra into the third bead and ran away. The third bead was a modified tracking seal. It told Naruto how far and how fast he ran. The diagnostic bead would check his heart rate, blood pressure and oxygen levels. There were 8 beads in all and one of them was a shield he could put up at any time. Another one is a seal for compressed storage. Not every bead was marked yet, and Naruto was just so happy that his project from a year ago was finally working. When Naruto was done with his workout, he looked at the information and smiled. He took off the seals on his rezis Tansen now had a baseline. He decided that in the last 2 years he would really push himself to be as ready as he could be. Naruto ran back home and showered. Once he was outside, he put on some olive cargo shorts and a blue shirt with a white spiral in the middle of the chest. His clones gave him an other bracelet with beads and he put on his blue sandals and ran quickly toward the Hokage Tower. Naruto was able to move very quickly because he didn't have his resistance seals turned on. He used proper manners and was allowed to see his Oji-san. The Sand Dame was curious about what Naruto was so excited about, and his curiosity grew when Naruto gave him a bracelet and told him to wear it. Harrison did because he believed the boy. Oji-san, I got it to work. It was my project. I even engraved it myself, so I made you one. What does it do? Naruto-kun, you have to link it to your chakras so no one else can use it. Then pulse it into those 3 beads, then you'll see what it can do, but don't fight it. Harrison raised an eyebrow but did what the boy said. He felt the chakra enter his body, but he knew it was his own, so he was confused. Once it stopped, he did it again. He felt another invasion and then he saw his own vital organs. He turned away from the view and turned on the other beads, a storage seal and a tracking bead. The tracking bead was meant to show how well the training was going. The Hokage almost couldn't say anything. I am so proud of you, Naruto. This is amazing. Naruto felt a familiar warmth grow in his chest, and when his Oji-san gave him a hug, it grew even stronger. He liked it. During the next 2 years there were a few important events for the Uzumaki. The first thing he did was meet his first friend. He was training at the time. He heard someone making noise, so he went to see what was going on. It was Hyuga Hinata, one of his classmates, and she was crying. They had never really talked to each other before except for the time he helped her when she was being picked on. He didn't even know that the boys were picking on her because she just looked hurt by what they were doing and wanted to now why they thought his questions were weird, so they left. He just gave a shrug and left. His Oji-san once said that when people cry they sometimes want to be held or hugged. He said that he did it with his baby grandson Konohamaru. Naruto thought that if it worked for him it might work for her too, so he sat down next to her and put one arm around her. She jumped when someone touched her or tried to comfort her. You okay? Naruto asked, which caught her off guard. He asked the question in an honest way as if he didn't know the answer. She said no as she tried to get herself together. May I ask what happened? Ned my og-san says talking about it helps. I'm a failure. Oh, how come as an heiress in my family my dad doesn't think I'm good enough? Naruto asked. Is he right? And Hinata jerked again. He didn't understand. To fail seems like a pretty clear goal. He wondered if she had been given vague instructions. Hi, she said in a low voice, wanting to wrap herself up. He just said then change it. Normally someone would feel judged, but Naruto said it so casually that Hinata was more confused than offended. If you failed, there is a standard. You have to figure out why you don't meet the standard and then make a plan to reach your goal. That's how I started challenging the clan heirs when we sparked. I'm not as strong as you, Naruto-kun. During their time at the academy she had seen the boy get better and better, and it seemed to be a steady process. He told her no, I don't think you would be, and she felt her heart break. She laughed when he nodded his head wisely after he heard him say you're strong like Hinata, so you should build on that instead of trying to be like someone else. I train every day and I don't know if you'd be interested, but if you ever want to spar with me or do something else with me, I'd be happy to do that. Why? Mioji-san said we're all friends and should be willing to help each other. I don't know why, but I don't like seeing people sad. Also, failing at something is just a chance to do better next time. I fail a lot because I try a lot. So you're a proud failure. Naruto smiled and said I think I like that. As soon as he said that, a kunoichi appeared in front of them. She had black hair with waves, red eyes, and a dress made of bandages. Naruto could only come to one conclusion, which he said without any shame: you're unusually attractive. The woman, who he didn't know, just smiled at the boy's boldness. She knew he wasn't talking about the Uzumaki, just that it was true to him. Thanks, Uzumaki-kun, but you might offend some women if you compliment them so boldly without even knowing their names. So how about we introduce ourselves and then tell you? Maybe it depends. Also, if word gets out that you call some women attractive and not others, some of them will be hurt, so some people will be offended if I do and others if I don't. That's confusing. I'll have to ask Oji-san about this. Well, I have to go. I'll see you around. Hinata by Naruto-kun. Hinata Kurenai started. What your dad told you isn't true. Yes, it is, but it doesn't have to be that way. After that day they trained 3 times a week together and became best friends. Naruto was always honest with Hinata. He was willing to help her solve any problem she brought up and thought she could do well. He could be blunt and strange, but she just learned to talk to him in his way. He showed kindness and care in his own way. Naruto learned something new about how people feel and why they act the way they do. For example, he had never heard of shyness before he met Hinata. She also helped him think about the right way to make him use the sexy jutsu. The second thing that is important is that Naruto finished the other 3 volumes of Fūinjutsu. Volume 8 was on Wanjutsu, how to make them and how to fight against them. It also showed how to expand and contract arrays, how to look at full arrays without opening the seals, and how to hide in cloak seals. Space-time Fūinjutsu and then Jutsu were the subject of Volume 9. It was mostly about summoning and improving storage seals to make stable pocket dimensions, but it led to Naruto's next project. And the third important thing, Volume 10, was about making things real and learning how to make complex seals out of all the things that had already been covered. This volume focused a lot on the creative side of sealing, like how all the languages, symbols, and other information were the same. It was up to the person who used Fūinjutsu to make it their own. His Oji-san was so proud of Naruto for finishing all the volumes, and he promised that as soon as he graduated he would get Naruto certified as a sealing master. Naruto had to take the official tests, but the results couldn't be confirmed until Naruto became a shinobi. Hinata told Naruto about that one. Naruto was hesitant, but he had to ask the question because he could see how happy his Oji-san was. The sand aim was so shocked by it that he asked Naruto to say it again. Is Yandami-sama my father? Oji-san, yes. Here is a new. He could have lied, but since lying would have put their relationship at risk, he chose to trust Naruto instead. I didn't tell you because your father had so many enemies. Naruto couldn't, and they would love nothing more than to hurt you to get back at him. I'm sorry I had to keep that from you. Did my mother and dad love me very much? You've never seen 2 people more excited to be parents. They'd be so proud of you, Maruto-kun. They were both masters of Fūinjutsu and would be glad you kept up your clan's specialty. I'm an actual Uzumaki. Yes, Kushina Uzumaki was your mother. Harrison watched as Naruto thought about what he had heard. Harrison had to ask Naruto-kun, how are you feeling, because he changed his face a lot. I don't know, like I missed Someth. I never had wistful. Naruto-kun, it means you're feeling yearning or longing, and that's what you're feeling. Oh, I don't think I like it. I think it makes me sad, and that's another thing I don't like. Harrison went and hugged his grandson. I know, my boy, but even negative emotions should be felt because they are a part of you and can help you grow. It shows that even though they were taken from you so young, you three were connected, and that goes beyond life and death. Don't let your emotions control you, but don't deny them either. They make you human, they make you real. He felt the boy nod his head. Aga inched his chest as he rubbed his back. When they talked about his parents, Naruto was completely enthralled by the details. Harrison told Naruto that he would start giving him his inheritance as soon as he opened an account at a Shinobi bank. He also told Naruto not to tell anyone until he was at least a tune in, but it would be best if he was a seasoned Junin. Naruto agreed, so they went out together and the boys seemed to feel better. The last important thing that happened was that Naruto found out what he was made of, knowing that so many people were afraid of the Kyuubi and that he and the seal could really stop. It was strange. It was also strange to know that his dad had done it and that his mom had been a Jinchuriki, which is what his Oji-san had called her. Oji-san said that there weren't many other options and that choosing another child would have been dishonorable. He said that no one knew Naruto's status until he was 3 years old, and he swore that if he ever found out who told them, he would kill them where they stood. Naruto told him it was fine, and it was good to know he didn't have a lot of bad feelings. People weren't very friendly, but there wasn't much to do anyway. On top of he had Oji-san, Hinata, and even Yuhi-san that showed that he could put things together, so he would do that. As Naruto sat next to Hinata and talked about the past few years, he didn't even notice that Hinata had joined him when his friend came in. He smiled at her to let her know, and she smiled back. Oh, the last 2 years Hinata had changed. She was still shy and quiet, but not as much so. They had fought and struggled, but she felt better about herself afterward. She understood that there was no magic to getting better. Work was just hard. Even though she was easily discouraged in the past, she wasn't afraid of hard work. She just needed to realize that she didn't lack a certain trait. She pushed herself every day with the help of her friend and her caretaker. Even though her father hadn't changed his mind about how much she was worth, the changes had been noticed by her family. Hi Naruto-kun, she said. The Hyuga heiress wore a jacket with 2 different shades of lavender blue pants and sandals that matched. Her hair reached her shoulder blades and she wore a headband around her neck. Good morning, Hinata. Naruto said he had also let his hair get longer, but the spikes were still there. 2 of them from his face and hung over his headband. On the back of his orange and black jacket was a red Uzumaki spiral. His paints and sandals, which came up to his shins, were both black. Naruto still wore his bracelet with beads every day. Hinata wore hers too. The beads were indigo with white iris designs all over. 6 months ago he gave her the seals as a gift of friendship, and she took care of them like they were the most valuable jewels. After the short hello, the 2 sat in silence and looked around the classroom while they waited. 2 newly trained kunoichi walked in and started arguing about who would sit next to Chiya Sasuke. This broke the silence. The 2 kept talking until Iruka-sensei told them to sit down. They did, but only after Sakura gave him a dirty look and Ino gave him a wink. Naruto just waved back, not really knowing why Sakuran-san was so angry with him. Soon after he turned 12, he told Sakura, Ino and Hinata that he would be willing to do sexual things with them if they reached sexual maturity because he thought they would be very attractive. He didn't think it was a big deal because it wouldn't happen for another 4 years. Sakura-san got scared and tried to hit him, but she didn't. Ino laughed and told him that he was way too bold. Hinata blushed and told them it was rude to make such an offer to girls he didn't know well. He said and didn't bring it up again, but Sakura-san has disliked him since then. Haruka-sensei said, now I'll tell you who's on your teams, please don't talk over me, and he started to name the teams. Harrison led Kakashi through Naruto's apartment from a distance away. It was about the right size for a child. There is a red couch and chair in the living room. There is a TV and a coffee table. There was also a desk with a stack of books in the corner there. Was also a stand with a quarter-staff made of wood and 2 rattans on it. The kitchenette had a stove oven, a sink with 2 sides and shelves above and below the counters. Kakashi looked in the cupboards. In the fridge he was only slightly surprised by what he found: fruits, vegetables, nuts and recently killed game as well as milk and cheese. The cabinets had things like instant ramen and granola as well as the things you need to cook. Not what I'd expect from someone who has been an orphan their whole life. After reading a book about shinobi diets, he asked me to teach him how to shop. Hokage-sama, why did you have to come with me? Harrison said you wouldn't have been able to get in any other way, and Kakashi was shocked. He's finished all 10 volumes of Fūinjutsu, been tested and passed each exam, and is now a certified seal master. The dog summoner did a good job of hiding his surprise. Do you understand what I'm telling you? Kakashi hi, even if he fails the test he has too much potential not to be a shinobi. Yes, he knows who his parents are, and he probably knows or will find out that you were his father's student. Great. Is there anything else I should know? You know how he feels and how he shows it, right? Yes, said the Junin. Then I think that's enough to move on. Okay, I should be able to move on. I'll leave. Hokage-sama here is a nodded, and Kakashi left. Harrison followed him out, and as soon as the door closed the security measures went back into place. He took one last look at the door and hoped he'd made the right choice. Kakashi thought that all 3 of his potential students would be hungry and angry when they got to the training ground. 2 of them were, but only the girl said anything. So much for the shinobi rules. Kakashi thought the blonde was fine, which could only mean one thing: you didn't you hi, even though it was against what I told you to do. Bad orders, Hatake-san, said Kakashi. He just smiled and took 2 bells out of his pocket. You've got an hour to get these bells. Whoever doesn't get it right is sent back to the academy. Naruto asked, how can 2/3 of us fail if 2 of us can get the bells? The others probably would have as well if they weren't hungry and nervous. Something isn't right here, he said after Kakashi set the timer and 2 of them went to hide. He said, you may begin. The only one left was the Uzumaki, whose face was blank. You should be hiding right. No, I've read in a shinobi tactics book that hiding is a bad idea. You already have what we want, so there's no point in coming after us. You benefit from us doing nothing. We didn't have an agreed upon plan or even a place to meet, so the other 2 didn't go back to work with me or each other. The copy ninja said. But he couldn't disagree. He would go after them, but if this were real life he would have no reason to. He took out his book to read, hoping to get the blonde or one of the others to get angry. It didn't work. To his surprise, the chibi Yandami threw a purse full of Ryo coins at him. Junin Hatake Kakas. Hi-san, I'd like to talk to you about hiring you, but what do you want me to do? A retrieval mission? When now? Can't. Too busy. Could I get a bell? Sorry, no. If you want one you'll have to take it. Sasuke and Sakura both thought Naruto was an idiot for trying to get out of working hard. They saw Naruto too. One of his beads, and then kunai and shuriken started coming from nowhere, all aimed at Kakashi-sensei. Please, I think this is a good thing. Hideki, Kakashi-san, please tell me what the real test is like. Kakashi didn't say anything, but he was impressed on the inside. It's clear that you can have the bell. Naruto, come hi. They also serve as a distraction, at least in part. Now tell me more. Sorry, no can do. I could beat you up until you did. Trust me, kid, you can't break me because you don't have the skills or the time. Yeah, I thought so too. Then we must work as a team since the state goal is wrong. You're trying to see how cruel we are. That's clear. Also 2 bells, but only one will ring. The numbers don't add up. Well done, Naruto. Do you want to set me free? Not until. Sasuke and Sakura grabbed the bells when Naruto said that his friends came out of hiding and did exactly that. Naruto broke the seal and Kakashi could feel his chakra flowing again. Naruto, how did you do it? It was smart to stay here so late, but 2:30 a.m. was just too early. After you left I set up the field. How did you make it happen? You weren't sending out any chakra. Naruto said didn't need chakra. Kakashi thought quickly and figured out that Naruto used a pressure trigger. The coins were probably to make up for the fact that Naruto didn't know Kakashi's exact weight. The chakra for the substitution was the final activation. Kakashi had been led around by a nose by a genin who had just graduated from the academy. That was embarrassing. Well, you're on the team for a trial run. Why is there a trial period? Sasuke asked. Naruto broke the test. You know what to do, so there would be no point in retesting. You be back here tomorrow at 7 a.m. sharp, Kakashi said, shun shining away afterward. Way to go, idiot. Yay, thanks dummy, I'd prefer you not ensue. Me, I don't like it. Besides, neither of you knew the secret of the test and I have no reason to assume you would have figured it out. I will see you tomorrow, Naruto said and then departed. Neither Sasuke nor Sakura could argue with his statements. Kakashi arrived to the Sandom's office, being granted immediate entry. When he walked in, he saw a room full of Junin in the sand name, all smirking at him. He then saw the crystal ball on the Sandom's desk and slouched. Team 7 provisional pass, he said, and everyone started laughing. It would be a long time before the copy ninja lived down getting subdued by a brat. Kakashi Hideki had been thought of as a genius and a prodigy for most of his life. Many people thought that made him arrogant, but he'd lost and failed too many times in his life to ever believe his own hype. He was proud though, and his Yandami chibi walked all over it like the roles were switch. He was drinking sake at the Rusty Kanai with some other Junin at the time. His report was short because the Sand Dame was too happy that his surrogate grandson was able to pass the bell test 3 generations ago. It hadn't been possible. Kakashi had even said as much. The Sand Dame just laughed and said that the temporary promotion was fine. It didn't change much, but if there were big problems he could put the other 2 on the back burner. He would have gotten any of us. Kurenaya told the copy ninja she could relate because she had been caught in one of Naruto's clever traps before. She was lucky that Hinata was the only one who saw her. Uzumaki-kun is a prodigy, Asuma pointed out. So are the Uchiha and so were the Hyuga. Last year they still couldn't have passed the bell test. Kakashi shook his head at the man's lack of vision. Even Kurenai had a little frown on her face. Neither of them are master RS at what they do. The name has lost its meaning because anyone who can make a half-decent explosive tag calls themselves a seal master, but Naruto is the real thing. Sandom-sama told me that, but I gave the kid time to plan and free reign over the battlefield because I thought he wouldn't stay up all night or have enough time in the morning to trap the place. Kurenaya thought Naruto probably used shadow clones and hadn't given up any sleep, but if the blonde hadn't told her yet she wouldn't expose him. Also, Kakashi would need to see how good they really are at what they do anyway. She gave Kakashi a smile and wondered how many problems Naruto would cause. Things were about to get interesting for Junin, who was known for being lazy. After the test and hearing how bad his teammates did, the blonde Uzumaki went for a walk. He liked to plan things while he was walking, even though the training grounds weren't exactly like the forests he used to play in as a child. They were close enough to make him feel like he was back there. Now that he was known as a seal master, it was time for him to choose 1 or 2 areas to focus on. Even though he was a master, that didn't mean he knew everything, but he knew that if he worked hard, no subfield should be out of his reach, and he was at a high enough level to really add something new to the field. From what his OG-san told him, his parents had very different interests, but it also showed him that his mom would beat his dad in a pure Fūinjutsu fight. T gave him that idea. Surely the Hiroshin's power could stop anything she did. Right, wrong. His mom was an expert at building walls in barriers that say, I now control everything around you, so be afraid, mortal. She had even made plans for one that could stop space-time techniques from working. He was glad that his OG-san gave him their notes and work. They put copies of the knowledge in the Hokage vault because they wanted it to live on and for future Hokage to give their knowledge to worthy people. With his shadow clones, there was no reason for Naruto not to learn from his parents, but he wouldn't say that he was an expert in those areas, even though he was amazed by what his parents could do. His OG-san had always been his hero, and the Hokage who was in charge the longest always wanted to protect his people as best he could. Naruto also wanted that, and the set of beads on his left wrist would be he basis for it. He wouldn't give those seals to anyone other than his closest friends and family, but he could build on them. Naruto wanted to be the first person who specialized in Fūinjutsu systems. He wanted to get rid of the need for paper files and carrier pigeons on things that could be taken or Changed. Instead, people would only be able to see information directly if they had access to it through their chakras or biometrics. Calls for help were sent right away to the Hokage, and orders were changed and sent back just as quickly. It would change the way information is stored and sent. Espionage and infiltration would also change. It would make Konoha safer if it worked. The Uzumaki decided to start with the parts about how to talk. Some parts of it would be easy. For example, he's already made a shared mass storage scroll that can move items. It would be hard to make seals that could project sound waves, thoughts, or displays that could send written words. There were problems with the layout, the stability, and even the range. Even though his OG-san had doubled the number of clones he could use, it wouldn't be fast, but it would be worth it. Naruto was thinking so hard that he didn't realize he was in someone else's training area until he heard a loud voice. The three genin of Maida Guy were surprised when they said, "Most young Naruto-kun, good morning," and the blonde didn't even flinch but instead answered calmly. He then looked around after saying, "Hello Guy-san, have I stopped your training? If so, I'm sorry and please let me leave." "Hold on, you're that kid," Tenten yelled, which surprised everyone because she rarely spoke loudly. Naruto smiled and said, "Oh, Tenten-san, hello." She yelled back, "Don't just say hello to me after what you did." "What did he do?" Tenten asked, hoping it wasn't anything bad. He offered to have sex with me. The guys on Team Guy were confused. "Once we were sexually mature. You're very pretty now, and I'm sure you'll be even more so in a few years." "I didn't know it was rude to offer until my friend Hinata told me it was. I'm sorry if I offended you," Naruto said, bowing briefly. "You sorry for offending me, but not for the offer." Tenten asked. "No, I'll still sleep with you when we're older," he said with a nod. "I'll just do it in a better way." Hinata once said that it's not always what you say but how you say it. How you present an idea or feeling is important, and if you do it wrong, people won't understand what you mean. Tenten couldn't do anything but stare at the little creep. He was so honest and polite in everything he said that she didn't know why she was so angry. Also, it was kind of a compliment and he meant for it to happen years from now. She couldn't understand all of his words, but she saw her sensei right that he would talk to her about it later. Neji asked, "Do you know my lousy cousin?" The boy gave a neutral answer. "Yes." "So you agree that she has failed and always will?" Naruto said, "I would hope so." The boy didn't understand what Naruto said. "You don't have to hope, it's her fate. The gifted and the failures are chosen at birth, but I'm not sure why you'd want that for her." Neji didn't really know what to think about the Uzumaki. He had seen him around but never talked to him because he thought that anyone who spent time with Hinata must be just as useless as she was. However, he had heard that the Sandaime liked the boy and that even Hiyashi-sama seemed to respect him, so he was on the fence about him. "Failure in practice helps you grow." My Og-san said that you don't learn much if you always do something right. Innovation often comes from learning from mistakes, and isn't that the point of training? No matter how hard she tries, she'll never amount to anything. It's decided. Naruto looked at the boy, his blue emotionless eyes staring into the Hyuga's own. Naruto was quiet for a few minutes before he spoke. "This isn't supported by facts," he said, and then he turned and walked away. Once Neji thought about what the blonde had said, he got angry, but yelling at someone who was walking away would have made him look like a fool. It wasn't something an honorable Hyuga would do. He told the new guy that he would teach him about fate soon. Lee said, "What the hell?" in a voice that didn't sound very young. He wasn't young enough to be confused. Never had he seen someone dismiss Neji like that, nor hit on Tenten. What was his name? That was Uzumaki. Naruto-kun, a brand new genin, he's had a hard life which has given him a unique way of looking at things. From what I've heard, Tenten-chan, he really didn't mean to hurt anyone. Maybe not, but he's still a little bit of a pervert. Guy shrugged his shoulders and said probably as he ran to the Shinobi archives. Naruto didn't think much about his run-in with Team Guy. It was a simple building that looked like many others in the village. He went rough the foyers and through the doors until he reached the stairs. He went down into the building's basement and down another hallway until he came to a set of locked double doors. Naruto put his hand on a seal on the left side of the door frame and pulsed his chakra. When the doors opened, the person Who worked in the Fūinjutsu section was there to greet him. Behind the doors was a room with several hallways, some of which could only be reached by the archivist. The walls were white like eggshells and the lighting made it seem like a hospital room. "Good afternoon, Naruto-sama," Kaoru said. Kaoru was in her Mid-40s and average height and weight for her age. She had black hair that was speckled with gray. She wore a blue shirt, a green vest and blue pants, which is a typical Chunin outfit. Her shoes had a small heel and an open toe. She was a tune-in by title, but she was actually a longtime Anbu member who was chosen to keep some of Konoha's most valuable information safe. Instead of retiring, Naruto blinked and cocked his head to the side. No one had ever called him Sama before, only his Oji-san Hinata and Ayame-san called him Kun, so this was a bit confusing for the blonde, and Kaoru noticed that I call you Ama because seal masters are respected in Konoha. This goes back to our alliance with the Uzumaki clan and has grown since they were destroyed. Naruto-sama, many people will admire what you've done. Oh he said, pausing. Yes, I don't know, I usually ask my Og-san. I don't mind if you call me Sama, but I wou don't mind if you didn't. Does that make sense? Hi, it could be that you don't like being formal or that you don't think you deserve the honorific. Both are possible. Do you have a preference for what I call you? The archivist asked, and Naruto thought about it for a moment. No, do whatever makes you feel. Go. I'll remember that now. Naruto-sama, what can I do for you today? Og-san said it would be okay for me to leave clones here to study, and I'd like to do that now. Yes, he did tell me that. What do you want me to do for you today? Space-time Fūinjutsu. I'll do it right away. There's a private room just to WN that hallway and to the right, Kaoru said, pointing to the hallway to her left. I'll bring the materials with me. Thank you, Kaoru-san. His Oji-san had already told him who would be helping him, so there was no need for a formal introduction. The archivist nodded and walked behind her to the hallway. Naruto called up 15 copies of himself and told them to go to the room. Then he went to the door. He had a few other things he wanted to do today, and he was confident that his clones would work hard at what they were doing. Naruto went up the stairs again, but this time he went to the second floor. He went out the door to the Shinobi Archives Genin section. This exchange went much more quickly because he had already asked for what he wanted. Naruto wanted to learn more ninjutsu, but since the academy only taught 3, he thought he should wait to see what his sensei would teach the team. Hideki sensei was the copy ninja, so he would probably teach them a good range of ninjutsu, but there was one of these jutsus that he had to learn because he had to move quickly across the village, so his Oji-san gave him permission to learn the Shunshin. When he heard this, he was happy and told his Oji-san. So the kin D. Hokage smiled and said that it was normal for young ninja to like learning new jutsu. The second thing was a book called Truth of Illusions by Naori Uchiha. He had read Toka Senju's book and a few other guides that were available to academy students, but none of them were as helpful as the Senju book. He hoped that this book would help him learn more about the arts of illusion and Ian release. Naruto figured that his information transmission seals would have to be good at using yin release since it was chakra formed or coded to send information. So far he had done well with his Fūn beads, but he needed to get better if he wanted to do more. Also, anyone who was even a little bit sensitive to chakra could tell he had a lot of it. He hadn't learned to hide it very well, just enough so that the animals he hunted wouldn't notice, but that was his plan. If people could feel his chakra, they wouldn't he could do genjutsu, and by the time they figured it out it would be too late. His Oji-san once told him that lying is a game with many layers and levels. A shinobi should be slow to make assumptions but quick to check, and Naruto Uzumaki is not a typical shinobi. Even though Naruto had trained with Uchi-san when he was training with Hinata, it didn't feel right to rely on her knowledge because she was hired to help Hinata, not him. He also didn't think he had anything to trade, so he wouldn't start a deal on those terms. When he started going on missions, he was hoping to catch her when she was free. After getting his stuff, he left the building to get something to eat. He opened his book and started reading. As he walked, he had been able to avoid most of the problems, but a fast-moving person who was not paying attention crossed his path and knocked Naruto over. He was startled when a much taller person slammed into him, pressing a book against his face so that he couldn't see anything. He was quickly pulled up and put back on his feet. The woman said, "Sorry Gaki, I didn't see you there." Now that he could see her, Naruto didn't mind as much that she was on top of him. She wore a tan trench coat T over an orange shirt and skirt held up by a blue belt. Her hair was purple and tied in a ponytail. Naruto was careful not to say how attractive she was, but he didn't have to. Anko saw that he was looking at her like, what you see Gaki? Yes, you're very attractive. He didn't say it, she asked, so he wouldn't go against what Yuhi-san told him to do. Do you have a crush on Anko-chan? You're a little too young for me. Stud crush as in infatuation? Not right now Anko-san, and as you said our age difference would be impossible right now. However, I will be sexually mature in about 4 years, and from what I've heard, relationships with big age gaps aren't frowned upon. Then if I got a crush on you, I'd pursue you if you wanted that. Anko looked at the boy and wondered if he was being serious or joking. His face didn't show any signs of lying and he was almost too honest, but he didn't care what she said. She did. Expect this to happen in no way. 4 years is a long time for a shinobi, Anko said with a wink, but if you grow up nice and strong I might think about it. She didn't expect the Gaki to hold out his hand like he wanted her to shake it. I think those rules are fair and I think we've come to an agreement. Anko took his hand because the kid's behavior caught him off guard. Yeah sure, and they stopped shaking hands and went their separate ways before the Gaki called out again. Sketching had become another hobby. Oh, could I draw you some time? He got tired of being quiet after reading so much about art. He showed his OG-san some of his old work. He was given feedback and suggestions on how to improve. It was strange that his OG-san kept smiling in a small crooked way but wouldn't tell Naruto why. Anko shot back, trying to get me naked already? Only if you want, but it can't be a mission. Og-san was very clear about that, and it caused me to delay my sexy jutsu. What, this conversation is making my head hurt. Gaki, I'll see you around about the art project. All right, sure. His name is Uzumaki. Naruto, by the way, I know Gaki, she said and shined away. Naruto wasn't surprised that she knew who he was because most people did. Naruto brushed off the conversation and went to Ichirok for lunch, where he ate several bowls of different kinds of ramen. Naruto was full, so he left a big tip and a sincere thank you and went to his next stop, Yamanaka Flowers. He saw the clan head behind the counter as he walked and goodbye Uzumaki, he said in a short tone. Hello Mr. Yamanaka, I want to buy a plant. Oh, you're trying to seduce someone else's daughter? No sir, I haven't been telling anyone to seduce anyone, and I'll probably be a tune-in before that happens. Inoichi had studied Naruto's illness for years and knew it was hard for him to weigh that information because he was a very protective father. Worse of all, he didn't know if the kid didn't know why he was mad at him or just didn't care. The mental jutsu expert was about to answer again, but someone else walked into his shop and stopped him. Hi Dad, Ino-s. 8 as she opened the door with her back to the cashier and the customer. When she turned around to face her dad, she saw the blonde Uzumaki there. Hello Naruto-kun, he said. Inuichi's face turned even more sad. Hello Ino-san, you should call me Anakin because we're friends. Naruto turned his head to T. He sighed and asked we, or he didn't think so because they didn't talk much in class or anywhere else. Of course you idiot, said Ino, but she didn't mean a word of it. She thought the guy was often blonde, blunt and a little strange, but Naruto's offer gave her a backup plan if she couldn't get Sasuke to leave her. Naruto just shrugged. He didn't really believe it, but he thought that maybe they could be friends someday. Inuichi asked in a rude way, didn't you come here for a reason? Naruto didn't care and just gave the man a piece of paper. I need that, said Eniki. He looked at the paper, nodded and then went to the back where his stock was kept. What are you getting, Naruto-kun? Something to give Hinata. Oh, am I really already that far behind? Naruto looked at her with confused eyes. I don't understand. Well, you're giving Hinata gifts, but what about Ino-chan? Oh, I just found out today that we are friends and I have no idea what you like. Then Naruto wondered what his new friend might want. Hinata's clan didn't give her much praise or encouragement, so he got her a gift because all they did was criticize or not say anything at all. Since Ino-chan wanted a gift in the same spirit, he thought of times when people have been encouraging or praised him, and then he had an idea. Naruto walked over to Ino and gave her a kiss on the cheek. Congratulations Ino-chan on becoming a genuine. The Yamanaka heiress was surprised. She had been making fun of the Uzumaki, but she realized that he seemed to be immune. She didn't NK he would just make their little game harder. What should she have said to that? Inuichi came back with the thing that was asked for, potted and ready to go. Naruto paid said good afternoon to both Yamanakas and left. Inuichi saw that Ino was quiet and a little red-faced. What's wrong Ino-chan, she whispered. Red, he kissed me but she wasn't paying attention so she didn't notice her father's murderous look. Ino left the shop to go home and planned to get back at Uzumaki, who was being sneaky after making 5 clones to practice the Shunshin. Naruto went to the Hyuga compound. They ran back to training ground 3. And Naruto went up to his friend's big fancy house. The guards let him through because they were used to seeing him after training together for a few months. Hinata's progress and growing confidence could not be denied. Today Naruto met a religious zealot outside and told him about it. When they found that the heiress caretaker and partner were helping her reach her full potential, they were nicer to them. Some even wondered why it took 2 outsiders to have this effect and if he or she's and their methods weren't as foolproof as they thought. Naruto waited in a place where people were usually invited to meet. It was a very simple room with rice paper walls. Hinata came and smiled at Naruto when she saw him. Hello Naruto-kun. He smiled and said hello Hinata. Naruto gave her a plant and said, I wanted to give you this as a thank you for passing Yuhi-san's test. It's just like Yuki-san he supplied AF. Turward. Hinata said yes it is. Thank you Naruto-kun. I hope I can take care of it as well as you do with Yuki-san. She had known about Naruto's plant pet for a while. Have you got time for a fight? Hi Hinata said okay, let me put this in my room and then we can go to the dojo. She went to her room and came back a few minutes later wearing an ash-gray training gi. The two walked to a training room that Hiroshi had cleared out for them to use whenever they wanted to train. Naruto did a series of hand seals after closing the sliding door and a seal on the floor briefly lit up. Hinata stood up, smiled and 2. The traditional gentle fist stance. Naruto walked over to her and stopped when he was about 7 feet away. He took his position with his knees bent and his feet not quite shoulder width apart. His hands were up and his waist was slightly bent forward. He turned to the side to cut down on the number of targets. The Uzumaki slowly moved toward Hinata, getting closer and closer. Hinata didn't want to give him the chance so she ran at him with her palm pointed at his shoulder. Naruto moved his back foot behind him and bent backwards while slapping the blow away with his front hand. He threw it off anew to avoid it and then he kicked it in the middle with his back leg. Hinata moved away and Naruto's kick went right past her. Naruto was able to get back on defense because his momentum wasn't that strong. He was able to stop the kick and replant his leg instead of having to fully follow through it. Whoa. RKED out well because Hinata used the chance to attack. Hinata ran at Naruto and dipped low to try to hit his leg. The Uzumaki raised his front leg to avoid her sweep in her next move, which was to use her other leg. He couldn't dodge or block the spinning back kick that hit him in the stomach and sent him sliding away from her. Hinata pressed on, planning to give Naruto no quarter. Naruto sent chakra to his index finger, his ring finger and his thumb. This turned his right hand into a makeshift fulcrum. Naruto turned around and went for a double leg takedown on the spot. Hinata was surprised because he had sneaked up on her attack plan and taken her down. Hinata and Naruto's fights with each other often turned into wrestling matches. Once Hinata got over her self-doubt, she was a very good fighter and Naruto often chose to go to his advantage. Hinata started to learn jujutsu, which is a grappling style. Because of this she was very good at it. Because of her natural grace and flexibility she closed the distance between her and Naruto just as he had done with his stand-up. So when Hinata was taken down she wasn't too upset because she had avoided giving up the full mount position. Naruto slid into side mount so that his body was perpendicular to hers and grabbed her wrist even when they were on the floor. It was a terrible idea to give a Hyuga full use of their hands. Naruto was trying to get a Kimura lock on Hinata but he had to roll off of her to avoid getting a knee in the side of his head. The Hyuga heiress rolled over and got back up, pressing the action button once more. Naruto stayed low and dodged her palm thrusts and finger pokes by ducking and moving sideways. He saw a break in her defense so he quickly stood up and tried to hit her with his forearm. Hinata fell backwards so she couldn't Fend herself against his hold on her or the knee to the body that came next. Naruto tried a fireman's carry on her while she was bending forward. He put one arm between her legs and tried to move her weight over his back and around his shoulder blades. Hinata saw what was going on and turned around. Then used her legs to wrap around Naruto's neck from behind. As the two of them fell to the ground, Naruto got out from between her legs and grabbed the kick that came after he left. Then he saw that Hinata had polish on her toenails, a deep blue. It looked nice. He was so busy that he almost didn't duck. When someone kicked him in the head, he didn't think Hinata would land on the legs she tried to kick with, or that she would try again and hit him in the chest. Before he could get up, he was knocked down and had a finger put to his head. Hinata said with a smile, "I win." The pain in Naruto's chest made it a little hard for him to breathe, but it was getting better quickly. Both of them walked to a side of the dojo away from the mats for sparring and sat down. As was their custom, they matched their Fūinjutsu and started to watch their fight over again. The first seal Naruto activated was a change to motion capture, and Naruto found a way to tell one of his Fūinjutsu about it. Since Hinata had the same seal, they could both see the same recording, but no one else could. They would watch their fights and point out both what went wrong and what went right. Hinata told Naruto that he needed to work more on his balance, and he agreed. Hinata needed to get better at dealing with opponents who changed levels often, because she always assumed that people would stand up straight. As they got closer to the end, they started to notice other things, and Hinata noticed something. "Naruto-kun, what kept you from eating my kick when you caught it?" "Oh, I don't remember you ever wearing nail polish, but it looks good on you." "I usually don't, but Karanai-sensei and I got a quick pedicure to celebrate becoming a team. That was a nice thing for you." "He-san, to do so was your plant." "Naruto-kun, I really liked it, thanks." Hinata: I have a question. When I was buying your gift today, Ino-chan came up and said we were friends and I should call her Chan. Before that I ran into a woman and she called herself Chan. I don't feel close to either of them like I do with you, so can I call you Chan?" Hinata smiled at Naruto's request. "It made me think of Naruto-kun. Of course I didn't know Ino-san and you two were friends." She said, "Neither did I. She just told us we were in the flower shop her family owns." Hinata said, "Oh, but she decided to talk to a certain Yamanaka about using her best friend for whatever reason. Do you want another round?" And they went back to the mat to fight. Neither of them knew that someone was watching. It had been a long day. It seemed like his days were getting longer and longer. He didn't like that he still had to sit in the chair and carry the weight of so many people. He had thought about how to get his Weiwa Road students to come back to class so that one of them could take the empty seat if he were 20 years younger. He knew exactly who he would train for the job, a boy who had the will of fire almost to the point of defying reality itself. He smiled for a moment when he thought about his favorite blonde Eve. And though he wasn't his official student, Naruto had learned a lot from what little Hiruzen had taught him. He soaked up every bit of wisdom he could as best he could. He looked at his Fūinjutsu, which were a great work of Fūinjutsu and creativity. The device got him to start training again, and he tell a difference, and for it to come from a child who was able to blend in other shinobi skills so well, it was a good thing. And even though Naruto was proud of it, Hiruzen thought he didn't really understand how important it was. Here is in turn to bead with his thumb and index finger. Maybe his is what would make them come back. Jiraiya loved sealing, and the chance to teach his godson something new and pass on what he knew would make him very curious. Day would be more difficult but not impossible. Could she refuse to see an auxiliary chakra system that was fully working? Her simple diagnostic jutsu was used in a way that almost no one had thought of, with the money and people to start a real medical ninja program and the allure of making medical ninjutsu and Fūinjutsu better. She couldn't stay away for long. He said he would work on his notices so that he could call them both back in morning. He was tired and wanted to hang out with his other grandson for a while. He was just finishing up when he got a message that he had a visitor. He knew it was Naruto because of how his assistant spoke, and he was happy to talk to the blonde. The newly made Jenna walked in, said hi Oji-san as he always did, and took a seat. Hersen said hello back to him and waited. Og-san, I have a few questions that should be easy to answer. Sure Naruto-kun, how can I help you? Harrison could only palm his face and sigh when he was asked, how do you know if you're developing a sexual fetish? Even if he tried this Oi couldn't be dull. Harrison stopped for a moment to think. The vibrations he felt from his Anbu's hidden laughter didn't make things better. They had often seen Naruto's unique Naruto-ness and they often found it funny that the boy was so innocent and direct, but this was something different. He wished that Bawako had been there to help him talk to each of his boys. He looked at his surrogate grandson and waited patiently for him to answer. Naruto-kun, why do you think you're getting a fetish? Hinata-chan and I were just sparring and her painted toes caught my eye. I almost got kicked in the head. Bako say of it and I thought that might be a sign of something. Well, Naruto-kun, you were getting to an age where you were starting to notice people you were attracted to. This often includes different features. It doesn't really rise to the level of fetishism and you won't know you have a real fetish instead of just a preference until you start having sex, which you shouldn't. You're too young. Of course I'll give it until I turn 16. I've already asked 4 girls if they'd be interested. Horizon could only raise an eyebrow at that. How did it go? I think I got 3 maybes and 1 no. Sakura-san seemed really turned off by the idea and Tenten-san didn't seem to like the way it was presented. Naruto-kun, such direct requests might bother some people. I know that now because Hinata-chan told me so. I should have asked her first so I could have changed my plan. She said you simply could not have done it. How ill girls know I want to have sex with them in the future if I don't tell them? Naruto asked as if his grandfather figure was crazy. Just remember that if they don't seem interested, don't push them or keep trying to get in touch with them. Okay. Hey, why must I wait to find out if I have a fetish? Haraso N wanted to be done with this part of the conversation, but he answered the boy anyway. Even though the way people use the word has changed, the strictest definition of a fetish is a sexual obsession that is the only way for the person who has it to get high. Now my second question, I'm still having true BLE with my footwork. Do you know how I can improve it? Yes, I do. Training Ground 27 has a series of high pulls with just enough room for your feet. They also move when the wind blows. Practicing your kita on them will help you improve your balance and footwork, but be careful because falls can hurt. Thank SOG-san anytime my boy. I'm actually glad you stopped by. I'm going to call my students back in the next day or 2. Do you think you could make a multi-tiered encrypted message for one in the diagnostic beat you made for me, for the other here is an ask? And then saw the internal debate going on. I know you said you wouldn't make them for anyone, but since her book helped you make it and it will make her curious, I was hoping you'd make an exception. All right, Og-san, but I'll make a copy of that one. That's fine. I'm sure the quality won't go down. What should the message say? Asked Harrison. Team 10 was waiting for their sensei to arrive at their training grounds. Each of them got there early because they had been told over and over that they should always be there before their sensei or superior because it shows that they are serious and committed. Shikamaru was looking up at the few clouds in the sky. The sun had just come up less than 2 hours before. Choji was eating a bag of chips. Ino was quiet and pale and she held a bento box like it was a bomb. Everything about her was wrong. Asuma noticed right away that his lone kunoichi didn't seem right, so he asked, why Ino, what are you doing? She said nothing, I'm fine. But she wasn't. She could shake the person who came to see her while she was walking to the team meeting. She got shivers just thinking about it. Good morning, Ino-chan, the Hyuga said as she walked up to her friend and fellow heiress. She gave her a hug while holding the bento box in one hand. Ino was taken aback. Hinata wasn't very affectionate or expressive. Still in the Hyuga's arms, Ino said hi Hinata. Hinata held on tighter when she tried to break it. I don't know what your game is, Yamanaka, but if you hurt Naruto-kun, I'll ruin that pretty face of yours since you claim to be his friend. You better act like it. This is your only warning, the Hyuga whispered, then pulled Ino's head down and kissed her forehead. I made this for you, Anakin. Have a good day. She handed him the lunch and didn't say anything else or look back. After Hinata was out of sight for a minute, Ino finally took a breath. Asuma didn't believe her, but he didn't want to find out why she was so strange. He didn't get enough money for doing that, so he moved on. Start warming up, he told them. We'll train for a few hours and then we'll go on some missions. As they started their routine, all 3 of them grumbled. Pruvisi Onal Team 7 was sitting on Training Ground 3 while they waited for their Junin sensei to arrive. Sasuke was happy just to stand still and look into space. Sakura would look at him and then grumble about how late Kakashi was. Naruto was busy making the encryption seal that his Oji-san had asked for. Even though he didn't like that his Junin sensei was late, Naruto had already worked out for a short time, so he didn't mind the break at 4:30 a.m. He woke up and made a copy of himself before he showered and got dressed. The clone had already made himself a light breakfast and lunch and cleaned up. Naruto left the house at 5, turned on his resistance seals and ran as fast as he could toward the training ground that Oji-san had suggested. When he got there, Naruto did some stretches and exercises to build his strength before he climbed up the poles. He moved slowly at first and right away he saw how this would help because not all of the poles were strong. Naruto worked, and as he did his keta he slowly got faster. He fell a few times but he grabbed a pole and didn't fall all the way to the ground. Since it was a short session, he only worked on his taijutsu because he didn't know what Hatake Sensei would give them to do. He left the training ground at 6:45 and went to training ground 3 via Shunshin. When he got there, he said the jutsu still needed some work. He would give it to a few clones later. He got there first. Sasuke and Sakura got there at the same time. After waiting for about 30 minutes, Naruto started working on his extra task. The encryption was meant to be a test for Jiraiya, the Toad Sage, who is known as a master of seals. Naruto had been looking at the seal on his stomach ever since he found out about his duty. He hadn't figured out much, but he did know that it was 2-4 trig. Ram seals put together to make an 8-trigram seal. It was meant to filter some of the Kyuubi's chakra on occasion, but the filter couldn't handle much, so Naruto planned to make it better. There were several backup plans, including a key that could tighten or loosen the seal. He planned to make a key back. He didn't want someone else to be able to decide how his seal worked. He also saw that the seal held 2 chakras from other places, but really that was it. Naruto thought that if his father could make such a good but flawed seal in the middle of a battle, so could he. He agreed that his father was smart, so any flaws in the seal were probably due to the lack of time, but if his father could make a seal that was only a little bit advanced, Naruto thought that the Toad Sage could do something a little harder. The seal was being made by Naruto, not on paper. He wouldn't draw the seal until he was sure of his plans. Most people would think that Naruto was just staring into space, but he had changed his Fūinjutsu. Now he could project more than just his health and fitness numbers or the fights he and Hinata had. He was just finishing up the 3rd layer of the array. At the time, his seal would have 3 layers and each layer would hold a different set. The first would have 2 points and be an even number. The second would have 5 points. The last one wouldn't be drawn at all. It would just be a sealing technique made by hand. Seals. Each array was easy to make because the seals were standard security seals. The hard part would be taking them apart, since odd and even seals usually can't live together. Most people thought this, at least Naruto knew that you just had to add parts to make them work together. He didn't see seals as flat but as 3-dimensional steps were needed for a house with more than 1 floor, and his branching seals were those steps. The young Uzumaki didn't know he was doing something revolutionary because he was just doing what needed to be done for his seals to work. Once Naruto was sure his seals would work, he saved the designs and got to work. He had gone over the CL's parts in his projection and found no flaws. At 9 a.m. when Kakashi got to the training grounds, he saw an angry Uchiha, an angry Haruno, and a chibi who was working hard. He was looking at the chibi so much that he almost missed his cue. He smiled and said, "Mama, I got lost on the road of life." When he opened his eye, he saw Chibi make a shadow copy of whatever he was working on, hand it to the shadow copy, and then walk over to Kakashi. Hatake Sensei, yes Maruto, will you always be late to our meetings? I'm in charge of a lot of my own growth and I'd like to set up a routine that doesn't get in the way of your plans. This took Kakashi by surprise. He was ready for some complaints and groans but not acceptance. Chibi was giving him trouble. Life is unpredictable, so training on your own isn't a bad idea. Just make sure it isn't so hard that you can't function at near full capacity. In fact, what is our routine, he asked, and Chibi gave him a file he had pulled from a storage seal on his wrist. I didn't do the whole routine today, but I also trained in training ground 27. Kakashi looked through the files which were very detailed and something caught his eye. Do you still have our seals of resistance? Oh. Enhai put them down for now. He said, I'm going to test your skills and I want a true reading. That seemed to make his blue eyes look a little more interesting. How are you going to measure us? With my eyes, of course, Hideki-sensei. We measure things differently. Kakashi said he wasn't sure but he thinks he just got burned. Trust me, it'll be fine. What does your training consist of? The rest of you. Before I run I stretch, do push-ups, sit-ups and pull-ups, then I run through my different kata. Every other day after school I switch between shuriken and ninjutsu, then I cool down. Sasuke said. Kakashi nodded and then looked at his kunoichi. He blinked and then smiled. Whatever we do at the academy, Sensei Sakura, I want you to start joining Naruto for his morning training. It's not enough to just work out at the academy. Hello Sensei, when do you start training? 5 a.m. What, it's 5 a.m. Hatake Sensei, I think she might have trouble hearing. I've noticed that her voice rises in a way I can't figure out. Sakura-san, I know the standard Kona has Shinobi sign language. Would that make it easier to talk? The Uzumaki's words seemed to hurt the Pinkett and Sasuke's smirk didn't help. I can hear just fine. Why do you start so early? I want to do a lot of things really, Sakura asked, but your grades weren't that good. Your grades were better than mine, but we're both genin. I'm not afraid of hard work, but I'm picky about what I'll put in. A lot of effort for. Okay, you make a good point. Before we go on our first mission, I want you guys to fight each other so I can see how good you are. Sasuke asked, what are the rules? Taijutsu and weapons, no maiming or killing blows. Sasuke and Naruto, you go first, Kakashi said as he watched the two boys get into their stances. Sasuke's form was familiar but Naruto's wasn't, even though Sandom wrote it down in the file he gave Kakashi. Kakashi still didn't know Naruto's form. He was surprised when Sasuke went on the attack because his style was to defend against attacks. However, he quickly realized that the boy was used to being stronger and better at fighting than his classmates. Kakashi thought might be a bad habit that needs to be fixed. Sasuke was good at using his skills and had a good amount of power. He could see though that the boy was getting angry because Naruto just stayed on the defensive and blocked or avoided every attack from the Uchiha. After a long conversation, Sasuke stepped back and made some space. Hideki-sensei, have you seen enough of Sasuke's skills? Can I attack now? Kakashi just nodded and Naruto unsealed two metal rattans, one in each hand. Naruto asked him to attack, which made Sasuke aware of the situation. He decided to take the lead. He ran back toward the Uzumaki and tried to give him a straight right punch. As Naruto moved away from Sasuke's attack, the same rattan hit him twice, once just above the elbow and again just above the knee. Without pausing, Naruto used his other rattan to hit Sasuke's tailbone, which hurt so much that the boy bent backwards. Now that he was fully behind Sasuke, Naruto didn't waste any time and went for Sasuke's left temple with a high kick. Only because Kakashi was fast and quick on his feet did Sasuke not get knocked out. When Sasuke saw how close he was to getting kicked in the head, he stared at Naruto with wide eyes for a SPL. It's second before turning and glaring at him. You were never that good in the academy. He put his foot down as Hatake-sensei finally let go of his leg and told Sasuke-san, that's wrong. No, it's not. When we sparred you couldn't beat me. I could have if I hadn't left my resistance seals closed. Then why didn't you? Sasuke asked in a frustrated tone. Because I was stronger than you and would have won. I wanted to improve my technique, and since the academy is for training and wins or losses don't really matter, there was no point in making it easier on myself. So you've been holding back the whole time? Asks Asaka, a little surprised. One of his hardest fights had been against Naruto and he didn't know how to feel about the blonde not giving his all. No, only in the last couple of years. Okay, you two sit down and I'll test Sakura. The boys did as they were told and watched Asaka attack their sensei. She RTED off well and had good technique, but she got tired sooner than Kakashi would have liked. After a few minutes her form started to get sloppy, so Kakashi told her to stop and made her sit with the boys. As you all know, this is a probationary team. I have until the end of our first C rank to decide if We stay together while each of you has a solid base to build on. My main focus will be on teamwork drills, formations and the like until I'm sure you can work as a team. I won't give you more skills which you might use carelessly. Now let's go get a mission. Kakashi kept his eyes open as they walked through the village. His kunoichi did everything she could to talk to the one Uchiha, but the boy wouldn't budge. He would have to work on both ends of that. She shouldn't bother Sasuke, but he could talk to her and not be a jerk. He also noticed that neither of them seemed to care about or be interested in He doesn't understand why, since the boy knocked out a Junin that is pretty cool. Chibi didn't seem to care as he stared into space, nodded his head at nothing and then made a shadow copy that left right away. Team 7 made it to the office in the end where Kakashi gave them 2D ranked missions to do in other places. The Honorable Sarutobi Harrison is working hard on his daily briefing and other important things. He works steadily through the papers until his assistant interrupts him to tell him that Naruto has arrived. Harrison calls Naruto in, but at first he is confused because Naruto should be with his team. The clone tells him that it is in fact a clone. This clone wanted to give the encrypted seal and his Fūn beads to someone else. Here is a new Naruto wouldn't take long to do the jobs he was given, but he didn't expect the boy to change so quickly. He thanked the clone for the work he and Naruto had done and the clone went away. Then Horizon started writing the messages he would send to his lost students. He always knew where they were in general, so it wouldn't take him too long to find them. He just hoped they wouldn't have adult onset childishness because he wasn't in a good mood. Here is in finished each message and called for 2 monkeys, telling them where they needed to go and what they needed to say. Just as his visitor was leaving, his door opened and a person he didn't want to see came in. The darkness of Shinobi just sighed when Shimura said, "I don't remember giving you access to my office." Even though he let the Uzumaki's status out, he wasn't doing it to be bad. The village was in trouble and people needed a pariah because focusing on something that was wrong would bring them together. He didn't come up with social psychology as this how every meeting has to be. LD cut off your head and then we'd never see each other again. A few years ago Danzo would have thought that was just a joke, but Horizon had changed and gotten his edge back. Since then it was good for the village but not for someone who ran a black ops group, which is technically illegal. The Futon Mas Tear just let out another side. I came here to make a request. Well, about what? I'm training a young boy around Naruto's age and I'd like to set up a play date for the 2 of them. I think they'd get along. Hiruzen couldn't believe what he was hearing and said, "You must have the biggest balls in all of the elemental nations. I'll kill you wherever I find you if you ever go near that boy without me there." And years later you asked me to let him meet one of your root. Well, I do, but that's not the point. I'm rethinking some things because of the young Uzumaki and I think it would be good for both of them. If Sai became friends with him, he's not going to fit in with that team you put him on. You have to know that I think Kakashi will be able to deal with the personality conflicts. You can expect gumdrops from rain clouds, but that doesn't make it a good idea, Danzo said. Harrison looked at him with a look of disbelief that Danzo didn't understand. "What? I just didn't think you'd be familiar with gumdrops. Now you're just being a jerk," Harrison said. That made him laugh. "If I do this an Ambu guard will be able to see it. That's okay. This isn't a trick. I just think the boys can understand each other." Fine, said Danzo. "Come back tomorrow and we can set something up." Danzo nodded and left. Harrison couldn't know that Danzo was just tired, though he had to make too many hard decisions in his life, and even though he didn't show it and some people didn't accept it, he was a firm believer in honoring those who gave their lives for Konoha. It was because of this that he respected Minato so much. Even though he didn't agree with him becoming Hokage, it wasn't easy for him to tell everyone that his son was Agent Shariki, but Konoha had lost something. Its spirit was dying and he couldn't let it go on. He took a chance and it paid off, but maybe too well. People got along fine when they talked about how scared and repulsed they were of the boy. He knew it would happen, but he didn't think it would last this long. He thought the people of Konoha were tougher and would get over it, or notice that Naruto was the only other person who had the same coloring as him. He had no idea that he would affect the boy's growth in the way that he did. He thought his root training was good, but he didn't think everyone should do it. That decision bothered him, even though the boy didn't seem scared and had as strong a will of fire As anyone else, he was missing the spark that made people great leaders, and Danzo wasn't sure if he'd ever get it if the boy had more time to grow up. His skills in Fūinjutsu and chakra capacity would make him an S-rank ninja. However, not all S-ranked ninja can become caged, and the fact that he heard a future Hokage made the man feel even worse. Danzo wasn't the same by the time of the Uchiha massacre. The massacre was his attempt to be his old self, but he just didn't like it anymore. He didn't mind guiding and training future ninja as well as he could, but he no longer cared about or wanted to play Game of Shadows. It was just no longer in him. Sai was the youngest and last person he hired. He just wanted to show the boy something new, and he thought Naruto could do it. The boy could make friends, but he seemed to do better with people of the opposite gender. Still, both boys would help the other. Sai was well trained, so he could be a different training partner for Naruto and also let Danzo teach the boy some jutsu. He didn't expect much from Kakashi because the man's thoughts were so strange. It wouldn't be much, but if he could make the boys friends with each other, it would be a good thing that didn't require a sacrifice, which was a thought that Danzo liked more and more. 2/3 of Team 7 were upset as they pulled roots in the field. Sakura hated having to do dirty work as the sun was getting close to midday. Sasuke didn't like the work or the way it was done, but he was upset about Omething else. Naruto Uzumaki was a mystery, a boy who didn't want to do theoretical work in school that could trap their sensei in a planned Fūinjutsu move, a boy who was never able to beat him at the academy but who now completely beats him, a boy who had trouble at first with clone jutsu but can now make clones of himself with no trouble, and that was what was making him mad. Sasuke asked, his tone of voice showing how upset he was. If you can make solid clones, why aren't you using them to speed this up? I think my speed is fine. Sasuke-san is right. If we want to get out of here, why don't we just make clones? Why should I do more work than the rest of you? If you want to pay me for it, I'm willing to listen. Do you want us to pay for you? Sasuke-san, I would be doing more of the work. Doesn't it make sense that I get something for that? Getting things done faster is the reward. Once again, I'm happy. How hard I work. They're just copies and you don't have to pay for them. Maybe not, but I have something you want to use and I'm fine with that if you give me something of equal value in return. Naruto's argument made Sasuke angry, so he said, I'm not giving you anything. Naruto said, that's fine. He didn't stop moving as he worked. Kakashi watched the conversation from a tree and gave a soft laugh. Even though it was for money, he couldn't blame Naruto's position. The other two people just assumed he would be fine with doing more work. He wondered what they taught at that ninja academy if the two weren't ready to bargain and haggle. One of the most important skills a ninja could have was the ability to negotiate. Violence should only be used as a last resort unless it was part of the mission. However, many people didn't follow this rule. He was glad that one of his students got that, even though boy was just trying to trick his teammates. Kakashi may be passionate about working as a team, but he wasn't a mark. If the other two wanted Naruto to work harder, they would have to make a plan. Kakashi knew he had a visitor on his tree branch because he has very good senses. He didn't look bothered. He did look at his students before he acknowledged the guest. Shadow clone jutsu was something Chibi was really good at. Are you the real thing or clone? Hatake sensei, well, clone __. What can I do for you today? Boss was interested in the book you were reading. What does it say? Oh, this is for adults. Like trade between villages during a time of speculation. Who knew tulips could be so important? No, not adult like that. Adult like relationships, bromance novels. I think Sakura-san used to read those during breaks at the academy. That doesn't seem very adult. Kakashi almost snorted, but snorting is cool, but he couldn't let Chibi think that his beloved Ichiha was like a bad romance book from a dime store. This kind of writing was the pinnacle of erotica. Sex kai clone __. The book is about sexuality. Oh, that's cool. Can I read it? Where could I get a copy? They don't sell these things to DS. I can buy weapons and I can make an array of explosives strong enough to destroy the Hokage monument. That doesn't make sense, so can I just borrow yours? Why are you so interested? Aren't you a little young for this? First of all, it's interesting enough that you can split your attention between it and Your official mission also research. Hi, I've asked several women out on sexual dates and I might even go out with a kunoichi named Anko-chan. That last part got Kakashi's attention. Wait, Mirishenko, you asked her out? No, not really, but she did say she might think about it when I'm older. Kakas. I could only stare at the clone and wonder if he was really this lucky. He had to know for sure. So how will the Ikaicha books help you with your research? There are guides to help with sexual performance, but fiction can help you be more creative. Chibi was a pervert in the making and based on he usually acts. Kakashi could turn his sensei's son into a cool pervert if he played this right, but Kakashi would aim higher. He would try to reach the top. The son of his sensei will end up being a gentleman pervert. Kakashi couldn't believe it. Naruto was a once-in-a-lifetime find. Someone who could give perversion a good name. Kakashi spoke up when he saw that the clone of his favorite student was looking at him. He remembered that the boy had more than one offer out and wanted to find out which one he liked best. So of these offers Naruto made or all of them for kunoichi. He saw the clone nod. Why, I could say it was being close mostly with kunoichi, but more than that, boss likes pretty girls who can fight. Hearing those words made Kakashi remember a conversation he had with his sensei a long time ago. Sensei, why do you like Kushina-san so much? She's the complete opposite of you. I wouldn't say she's the exact opposite. Kushina can be a very kind and caring woman, and she can also be quite violent. What can I say? I like a pretty girl who can fight. It will be you, Chibi. I'll make sure of it, Kakashi thought as he nodded in response to what the clone said. In his head, plans were forming on top of plans. What Kakashi didn't know was that his determination made several kunoichi shiver, and they all had the same thought at the same time. Kakashi bastard, they didn't know why, and they wouldn't know for days. After 2 days as Jiraiya walked along his path, he wasn't surprised to see a monkey-some in waiting for him. He was going to meet someone else today in a village in the south of the Land of Fire. He didn't know what a summons was, but his sensei had called him this way when something needed to be done right away and couldn't wait for their regular check-in procedures. The black-haired monkey ca me up to Jiraiya's knee and said, Jiraiya-sama, this is a message from Hiruzen Samanth. He reached down and took the scroll from the monkey's open hand. Jiraiya, this scroll has an encryption seal that was made by your godson, who is also our most recent official seal master. If you can't break the seal by the end of today, you should go back to the village right away. If you can break them, then you should follow the instructions inside. If you ignore this call or take too long to come back, I will come for you with my bow staff. Jiraiya, you don't want that, trust me. Here is in Sarutobi Sandom Hokage. Jiraiya read the note 3 times more to make sure he really understood what it said. Minato's boy, who was his godson, was already a seal master at noon. Even for a new Uzumaki, that's a lot. Part of him just wanted to go home and forget about his sensei's test, but the seal master also wanted to see how good his Odson was. Even so, if the boy wasn't an expert in encryption, he probably wouldn't be able to make something that complicated for a 10-year seal master, but Jiraiya would teach him more about security seals. When he came back, the toad sage put chakra into the storage seal at the bottom of the letter and watched as another scroll came out. Jiraiya took it apart because he was really interested in what his godson had made. He looked at it carefully, focusing on the way it was made, and stared and stared and stared. Then he looked up at the summons, then back down at the seal, then back up at the summons, and yelled, what the __. As this, Jiraiya would spend the rest of the day trying to figure out how the seal was made before calling a toad to meet his contact and running off to Konoha outside of the Land of Vegetable.